First item this evening is a public hearing for bond ordinance authorizing financing for cost of separation payments to or for the benefit of employees of the city, stating the estimated total cost thereof is $2,100,000, appropriating said amount therefore, and authorizing the issuance of not to exceed $2,100,000 bonds of said city to finance said appropriation. Okay.
I have to open the hearing, right? I open the hearing.
Okay, very basically, the city of Long Beach has a bunch of different funds. One fund is, there's a sick leave account, there's a personal leave account, there's a compensatory time account, and as such, when an employee leaves service, they have to be paid out for the monies owed them in these various accounts. The city, at times, throughout my entire career, has also allowed people to cash in time at various times throughout the year, their career, whether they have a cash flow problem at home or the city has the wherewithal and we can pay it off at the current rate rather than the rate that the employee makes when they retire. In my case, the day that I saved from 1978 was worth about 29 cents. It's worth a lot more today. So it would have been much more prudent to pay that off back then than to pay it today. So what this bond encompasses is all the people that separated from service and were obligated, we were obligated to pay this money that they took. Other people were anticipating separation and did receive some money. And then the third category were some hardships. This money has, the most important thing that I want to know tonight, we can revisit whether or not you like the process, don't like the process, but this money has been spent. Failure to pass this bond will mean there will be a interruption in payroll. We will not be payroll for the end of the year. So that's the bottom line. If you vote this, if the council votes this down, we will be broke before the end of the year. Ms. Hightower, would you want to come up and expound upon that?
Good evening, Ms. Hightower. Thank you for being here. I'd also like to thank you for allowing the council to talk to you about 2 weeks ago. I think 2 weeks ago yesterday, we spoke on a conference call and you informed us everything about this, allowed us to ask as many questions as we needed to, and availed yourself to any future questions. So I thank you for being here for the public's benefit as well.
You're very welcome. It's important for everybody to understand, the purpose behind this. And, Taggy just put it very well. And in a nutshell, the city has contractual obligations to pay people out their separation pay that they're due under contracts when they leave. The city has a few options in order to finance these. You can either budget for them or you can borrow for them. For the 2018 fiscal year, the city opted to borrow for it. So in last year's budget that was adopted, you did include separation pay borrowings in order to fund these payments. These payments have amounted to about $2.1 million projected through the end of the fiscal year. So that's exactly what we're putting forward to be authorized today to make sure that the city does not have that hole in the budget at year end. At the same time, these payments have been made throughout the year. So the city has fronted the cash, has laid it out before it's getting reimbursed. Therefore, it's put a strain on the cash flow. So if we don't borrow it by the end of next month, the cash flow situation of the city will be dire.
And these payments have been going down year to year?
Yeah, so I believe the one right before I came on board was about 5.2 million, then it rose to 3.9, it was 3.2 last year, and then it was 3.2 2 years ago, 2.4 or 5 last year, and then about 2.1 next year. So they are going down every year. And ideally, hopefully, once they get manageable, the city will eventually budget for them and not have to do this anymore.
And the ramifications if this doesn't pass?
I did take a look at cash flow. Aaron and I have been watching cash flow because this is the time of year where the city does have the least amount of cash to begin with. The last tax payments are collected in February, and there really aren't any more tax receipts until mid-July, early August. By my estimations, by the third week in May, which means by the June 1st payroll, the city will not have cash to pay both its vendors and its personnel.
The lack of payment for the vendors, what's the long-term ramifications to that?
So you're talking about, the employees' health insurance, which runs about $800,000 a month. Your workers' comp insurance.
Sorry, say that again, how much a month?
About $860,000 a month is your current health insurance, maybe $900,000. across all funds. You have your last workers' comp payment of $600,000 that's due, so you will still be possible insurance class. And then this is also the time that the city's ramping up to get ready for the beach, to get ready for the season. So it would not be a great time for your vendors to stop giving your department supplies, materials that they need to get the city ready for the summer season.
Any from the council?
Okay,
Any questions?
just for point of clarification, it's been said twice in terms of the interruption of payroll. So I just want to be clear on this, that it's not going to happen this week. It's going to happen 3 weeks from now in May.
Yes,
correct?
so the timeline, so you guys authorized this tonight. There is a 20-day estoppel period, which is subject to permissive referendum, which means that the city cannot sell any debt associated with this authorization for at least 20 business days. It usually winds up being 23, 24 by the time the clerk can actually get the notification in the paper, because it's actually sometimes published, not sometimes authorized. Which means that the earliest you can sell this debt is like the middle of May, and then we can close the third week in May. So if it's not authorized today, if let's say you decide to push it off to the beginning of May, then you can't borrow until the middle of June. It's usually 4 to 6 weeks from the time you authorize it to where you can actually get the cash in hand, because of the different rules.
Okay, so thank you for that clarification. Now, you also stated that the monies were a part of last year's budget, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so when that occurred, a couple of questions. Then why wasn't the council informed at the time that, for whatever reason, we would run out of funds right now?
Well, the timing of the running out of funds is all dependent upon what the expenses are for the year, what the time of cash flow. The city has different revenues coming in, but not all of them are coming at the same time every year. So it really is depending on timing. We do try not to borrow until we absolutely have to avoid the interest costs.
Okay, so then for the payout for exempts, then what fund was that taken out of?
Whatever fund they are in. So if the exempt is in the general fund, then it was taken out of general fund termination salary fund.
Okay, so if the money was taken out of the general fund, then why wasn't the city council informed?
And that is a question for management.
Okay, but, I mean, I'm sure that there's somewhere in the charter that speaks to the fact that at a certain point, if there's authorization for monies for a particular group of people, which would, in this case, would happen to be the exempts, why wasn't the city council informed? And you just said that it's a management issue. So at this point, who can answer that question? Anyone can answer the question.
The only people who can answer that question is the management team that actually paid it out, and they're no longer here.
I would also like to point out that of the $2.1 million we're talking about, those payments are maybe $300,000, $250,000, $300,000. The majority of what you're borrowing is what's paid out to your leading cops, your CSEA, your fire. That's where the majority of it is.
Right. Well, I think we all support that. We understand that there are hardworking people. All the people who are listed are hardworking. That's not the question here. It's not the heart of the city. We recognize that. But it's just really about due diligence in terms of information and sharing of information once again. So that's why I'm asking the question. You stated that the exempt, there are different funds that money is coming out of. So I'm trying to figure out how does that work?
Well, when you're establishing our different funds, I believe, just to clarify, you need different buckets of accumulated time.
Okay.
So the fund is, for the most part, the general fund. And then a little bit of the exempts, I believe, are all in the general fund. So when you talk about funds or buckets of accumulated time, you accumulate vacation, sick pay, comp time, and personal time. So those are the, I think you more like buckets of time rather than funds.
If I may ask a question. The city charter clearly states exempts are not eligible for comp time. So how are they accumulating comp time?
They don't. When we
Just
talk
said-
about
just
cops,
said they-
we have because your CSEA, your fire, and your cops get paid comp time. I'm not
That's fine,
talking
what
about
about the exempts?
exempts are not paid out, nor do they accumulate comp time. They are not paid out for comp time.
So I saw this list yesterday at 4 o'clock for the first time of the employees that are being paid out. And there are a number of employees on here getting sizable payouts that are still city employees. The resolution that I was handed says this is to authorize the cost of separation payments. There's a lot of people in here that are not separation payments. So, A, the resolution is not correct, because it's saying it's a separation payment. So I don't know if we need to go back and split this into two resolutions, but, and then the other thing is, so I did a back-of-the-envelope calculation on one exempt employee who's getting a $108,000 payout. So city charter says exempt employees can't have more than 50 days of vacation time accrued. They get 1.25 sick days a month. Based on this person's employment with the city, the amount of time they were here, the maximum payment I can come out with doing my math is $52,000. How is this person getting another $56,000?
As far as the individual calculations, that's done between the city manager's office and payroll. I wouldn't review that.
Okay, so, thank you for that. You just segued into my next condition. So if I can't make the math work, why am I supposed to believe the numbers that are on here? I've been given, my job as a fiduciary for the city is to make sure what I'm voting on is correct and accurate and verified.
The actual numbers on the spreadsheet did come from your general ledger. So they, as far as the amounts as of 4/7/18, they came from amounts that were already paid in cash to these people.
No, I'm not saying that. So, do our exempt employees keep time sheets?
From what I understand, yes.
They do, okay. So, I certainly haven't seen any justification for the amounts that were. That's what I guess what I'm getting at is.
Well, justification for the amounts and is a different, I believe, a different conversation than whether or not these amounts are already paid out.
I'm not disputing whether they were paid out, but they were paid out at incorrect amounts or amounts somebody made up or.
That would be determined internally as to whether or not anybody received any unjust enrichment through these payments.
So, considering I haven't been given the information to do my due diligence, how am I supposed to vote for this?
Having due diligence to make sure that the amount that was paid out to employees are correct is a process that should be put in place or can be put in place before payments are made to employees. These payments have already been made to employees. So by not authorizing this, you're not changing what has already happened, but you will possibly put the city in a financial position that could have consequences long term.
Or you can view it as a perpetuating bad behavior.
Councilman Miller, if you just have a quick question based on your question. Are you going to say when these payments were made? Is that better?
Yes.
Are you able to say when these payments were made?
Are you talking about the specific exempt ones that are still here? These payments have been any time between July 1st, 2017 through April 6, 2018 for what's already been paid. And then there's a projection based on the payout schedules related to separated and prior separated employees that get paid over 3 years.
Can you just repeat the dates at July 1st?
Sure, so it would have been through July 1st, 2017 through now. And then it's projected through the end of the year. When most people separate, they do not get a lump sum. Most people opt to be paid out over 2 or 3 years based on their agreement with the city. Therefore, they'll continue to get a set amount through the end of the year, and that's been accounted for.
Is this list shown to the public?
I don't know.
Is there a reason we can't post it? They're paying for it, they deserve to know.
I mean, that's a matter for the council to discuss, absolutely. I said that's a matter for the council to discuss, absolutely.
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's public information. Anybody have any more questions for Christy Hightower? Does anyone wish to speak from the audience? I told Mr. Duval, sorry.
Well, that's okay, where'd you go first?
Okay.
Yes. Good evening, Lloyd Lester, 72 Boyd. I think most of you guys know I'm a bankruptcy attorney, and I have clients come in every day, and they tell me, I ask them, well, what led into this problem? They said, well, we spent money, and we didn't have it. I don't see the difference here. Basically, what I've been told this evening is you spent money, and now if we don't pay it, we're going to default on it. And we not only did it this year, we did it the year before, and we did it the year before, and we did it the year before, and we did it the year before. Did I hear wrong? Well, I mean, I'm listening to this, and I don't understand if you're budgeting. What I heard, the direct quote was we could either budget for them or borrow for them. How is that the way to run a city? How is that a way to run a municipality? Where you either decide you're going to pay it and then borrow for it, or you properly budget for it. What am I missing? No answer. I just don't understand it. Now, it's also, the legislative memo says it's for retirement funds and other financial commitments and obligations. Yet, when you're looking at the ordinance, it's basically saying for the cost of separation payments to or for the benefit of employees of the city. This isn't for separation payments, from what I've heard. This is for payments that we've already made. And now we need the money. We need to borrow the money to make our payroll and pay our vendors. Did I hear that wrong? The silence is deafening. Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Well, now that you've completed your comments, I think I can respond to both of them. I think that when we went through the budget process last year, there were a number of considerations that each of us took into account. One of them was the impact of a tax increase on the residents of the city. There are things that we are able to bond for, so we can pay in the out years, so to limit the percentage of tax increase. We need to consider the fact that a number of these employees that were let go had years of service to the city and have since retired, whether they were CSEA employees, whether they were police employees. We can all debate whether we think that these payments were appropriate or not appropriate. The problem that we are faced with right now is that we entered into a budget, and we all passed it unanimously, besides Mr. Bendo, that counted and included an understanding that separation pay, which is very common, and the reason why the statute allows you to bond for separation pay is that most municipalities actually bond for separation pay because it is an enormous bill that, if you converted it into a tax increase, would have been unmanageable for a resident. So taking all of those things into consideration, and the fact that there were a number of employees that were retiring who needed to be paid out pursuant to their contracts, that we were going to bond this portion, which is in compliance with the statute. Your other question?
You're not bonding this part. What you did was...
We paid, let me finish. I let you finish your comment.
Oh, certainly.
You pay it out as it comes up with an understanding that that portion of the budget is going to be filled by bonding for this amount of money. At least that's how it was explained to me. That's how I understood it at the time when we were passing the budget, and we were all aware of the fact that this is something that we were going to do. We praised the fact that the number had been decreased over time, whether it was through bargains, negotiations with the different unions about how things are paid out and how this works. I think that this simply is an opportunity for us to look to how we are going to continue through the end of the year. We can all debate whether it was appropriate, not appropriate. Nobody wants to wake up tomorrow in a city that is no longer going to be able to function. There are employees from our city who have retired who are entitled to get this money. And there are employees who work here at the city right now who I'm not prepared to take away the money that they get in their paychecks to pay for food, clothing, and their children and their families. We can debate whether it was right or wrong that these payments were made, but we're faced with one situation. We need to make sure that we can continue to run a city and that the employees that work hard and the vendors that provide us with different things are paid. The alternative to that is years of litigation that will cost the city tremendous amounts of money. And that's something that I'm not prepared to do.
All right, Ms. Diamond, first of all, yes, you're talking about employees that work for the city, but we're not privy to that. For some reason, the public's not privy to that. You guys all know what the amount is and who the people are. But for some reason, we're being kept in the dark. I don't understand that. Number two, the proper way to do this, and Mr. Cagney knows this because that's how the school works. We don't borrow. We put money aside to pay for retirements. We put money aside to pay for people that are going out of service. And that's the proper way to budget. And believe me, I handled the budget, and Mr. Cagney did too, and he did a great job of it. Handled a budget much bigger than the city's budget. And that's how we did it. We didn't say at the end of the year, oh, guess what? We're out of money. Let's borrow money. And we didn't do that year after year after year. I understand you've done it now, and, you know, I don't know what to say. You know, you need to borrow the money because you've already spent it, and that's exactly what you told us. You've already spent the money. So I guess we have no choice, do we?
I think as Ms. Hightower had said, and as we said in the budget presentations earlier this year, the goal is to not have to bond for this. The numbers have come down long before I was on the council. She just mentioned that 5 years ago, I think, what did you say, it was $5 million? So we're decreasing the amount with the hope that it will be a manageable number that we can put in the budget that won't impact our residents dramatically just to pay this particular bill.
It's great you're decreasing it, but you're still spending more than you're taking in. That's a formula for bankruptcy. Thank you.
State your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Lou Duval. Quick question. I know years ago the city was in financial ruin, for lack of a better word, and we've gotten better through the years, and I thought there was a rainy day fund. Is there not a rainy day fund? And if there is, could that be used for?
No. What we have the fund balance is pretty much tied up with FEMA. We had to lay out a lot of the money for the hundreds of millions of dollars, $100-something million in repairs. As that money was laid out, then we get reimbursed from FEMA. That restores our fund balance. But then another bill becomes due from the boardwalk to the bulkhead to the different things. So we're constantly funding. So right now we have $4 million in the bank from FEMA that's due to pay off a RAN in June, and then we had on the last agenda another $4 million that we laid out that we're going to borrow and get paid back from money we laid out with FEMA. So we have so much money invested in FEMA. We're actually
FEMA owes the city.
Yes.
That's
So we don't have the money liquid.
Right.
Right now, we're actually hedging of whether or not we will get the $4 million due us from FEMA before we have to borrow it next month. Because we spent the money and we have to pay it back.
Right. So basically, the rainy day fund is tied up to the money that's owed to FEMA?
That's my understanding.
Right.
Actually, from the state.
From the state.
Money that we
To us, from the state.
not money that we owe to either FEMA or the state, but it's
Correct,
money that
yes.
is incoming for us.
We have IOUs.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to.
Okay. One other thing, when you guys really speak to the mic, I always sit in the front, if I can never hear, but I sit in the back, so we'll talk into the mic.
Thank you, Mr. Duval. Ms. Hightower, can you just explain that rainy day fund?
So what people refer to as a rainy day fund is really the fund balance that's sitting in, for the most part, general fund. New York State sets certain guidelines as far as where your fund balance should be to maintain a healthy fiscal environment. The rock bottom for a general fund is about 5%. They recommend 10%, but they really don't like to see less than 5%. Right now, the city is probably about just under 5%. So whatever rainy day fund is left needs to be left there to weather any unforeseen emergencies. There's really nothing available really to, because I'm saying if you use your rainy day fund, it's going to go down by $2 million. So now instead of $4 million, it's $2 million. on an $80 million budget, that's a very small amount to have to help float the month.
I have just a quick follow-up question. When we were on a conference call, I was actually on a conference call with you and Councilman Bendo. Same question came up. What's the status of the rainy day fund, and what do we have on hand and why? You'd expressed to us that due to our deficit financing, there was almost a prohibition against a certain amount in a rainy day fund. Can you explain that?
Yes, so there's certain IRS rules around borrowing, especially municipal borrowing, and it's really engendered in the fact that when you buy municipal debt and own municipal debt, the income you make from it is tax exempt. So the IRS likes to limit the amount of tax exempt debt that's out in the market, because then if people don't buy the debt that the government does make taxes on. So the IRS has all sorts of rules as to how you can't earn in the tax exempt market. And the way it works is the city's under deficit financing. So anything really over anywhere from 5 to 8%, they allow you to have about a 1 to 2 month reserve to be able to pay bills as they come due and wait for receipts to come in. But above that amount, you really can't borrow anymore or allow your fund balance to really accumulate above that. Anything above that, you need to use it to pay down some of that debt. So what the city has done over the last few years, because we did have a decent rainy day fund, is except for this year's budget, but for all the budgets, for I think 3 budgets prior to this, we appropriated fund balance to pay down the deficit financing, principal and interest, in order to use that rainy day fund to get it down to a level where the IRS would deem it acceptable for us to still be in compliance with the deficit financing legislation that we're still under.
Good evening, just state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Karen McGinnis, and I'm 102 Pennsylvania Avenue. This bond issue is a done deal, water under the bridge. But what I ask of the council at this time is I don't want to hear explanations, I want to hear solutions. And the solution to this is to actually talk to the payroll clerk who has to certify the payroll. And as a city council member, you have a right to ask for that payroll. You guys should have a right to ask for it every month. You should be able to see who's accruing vacation ridiculously and why, so that you're not giving away, which right now looks like hundreds or maybe even millions of dollars in time that was not earned. That comes out of my pocket. And second, with the upcoming budget, I suggest that the council members have, which they have the right to ask for, is the financing schedule of any bond issuances coming up with the upcoming budget. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please state your name and address for the
Mary
record.
Savage, Long Beach. As I understand what you were talking about before, there are some people that got separation pay that still work for the city. My husband didn't get separation pay until he left his job, and that was in the course of over 3 years. Why are people getting, they can't all have, because the list looked pretty long from when Mr. Bendo put it up. All these people had some emergency financial situation that they needed to pay out right away. And why do you not budget and our little, as Mr. Lester said, the school budget, you vote on it, then you spend. You don't spend and then take a vote on it. That's just not right. You're putting your workers in a pickle, you're putting the taxpayers in a hardship, and it just seems like, you know, what are we supposed to do? Tell families they can't have a paycheck because nobody really looked at this and balanced it? You're really very unfair to both your workers and the taxpayers.
Please state your name and address.
Michael Lilly, Long Beach. Mr. Frazier, I just want, these are just my questions. Councilman Bendo kind of really went over all of the questions that I would have, I'm sure others have. It's a budget issue, timing. The one thing that Ms. Olszewicz just said is something that I would have a question on as well. If somebody's continuing to work, they're not separated, so why would they be paid already? Or can that be deferred to next budget year? These are my questions. Also, the cost of the $2,100,000 at an approximate 3% interest rate, because I don't know what the cost of funds are. It's about $450,000 a year. And I just wanted to make sure that that money is in the budget if this was anticipated in this past budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hightower? Can you speak to the interest rate? Potential interest rate? Yep.
Okay, so, first question is as far as them being deferred to next year, these amounts have already been paid out, so they can't be taken back. But, tax rates are on, most of the people you're talking about that were paid out before separating happened in 2017. Now in 2018, there's no mechanism to take that money paid the prior year to an employee, unless there's back pay on that. As far as the interest rate, the city borrows anywhere between 3 and 3.5 long term. So the $450,000 a year over the 5 years is an accurate figure. However, the way that the city structures this type of borrowing is we couple it with other capital borrowings that have 15, 20, 25, 30 year PPUs, and what you can do is you can use the weighted average. So the city actually gets anywhere from 12 to 15 years to pay these off. We don't have to pay it off in 5, which is what this document has alluded to, that we can smooth it out. As far as adding to the budget, I wanted to say it before, this $2.1 million would have been an additional 6 to 7% property tax increase if included in the budget. So while that should be a long-term goal for the city to start budgeting for these, in reality it is a large property tax increase to put them on the budget.
And
Quick follow-up question. Can you speak to why there would be separation pay for employees who have not separated?
That is a management decision as to whether or not they pay out employees certain. Some people are allowed to cash out some comp time. I know from when I was here, I know that there are some employees that their job is such, and they're kind of the only person who does what they do. They very rarely can take a vacation or any length of time off. Therefore, they're usually allowed to cash 1 or 2 weeks in because they can't take their vacation. Sometimes that's done. It is a relatively small amount compared to the amount of separating employees.
When you said comp time, earlier you were asked about exempts accruing comp time. Is it solely comp time, or is it other amounts that are accrued?
So the exempts don't accrue comp time to be paid out, no. But your police, fire, and CSU workers all do.
What would exempts accrue?
Exempts accrue sick, vacation, and personal.
And is that what some exempts are paid out, sick, vacation, and personal?
Yes.
Once those are paid out, what happens to the bank that exempt would accrue?
For example, let's say somebody was paid out 100 hours of vacation, their bank is reduced by 100 hours. So that when they separate later on, then you don't pay those hours at the higher rate.
When you say separate later on?
Whenever they leave the plan.
So if they're paid out at their current rate, later on they had a pay increase, they can be paid later on at that higher rate?
If the hours are still in the bank, yes, but they're not.
Thank you.
I just have a quick question again about last year's budget. So, just based on this conversation, is it fair to say that the bond amount was actually counted as anticipated revenue?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And I just have a question in terms of, we want to get to a point, obviously, we want to get to a point where this is included in the budget. Is this a fairly common practice for municipalities that are in the financial situation that we are in, which I think most municipalities are in?
In this financial condition, yes, it's definitely common. Ideally, once the city can afford to budget for them, you would put in kind of a set amount, even if, let's just say it's $2 million, and then long term, what a good policy would be is, let's say you budget $2 million, let's say 1 year, it's $1.2 million, and you have the next $800,000. You can either, put that in reserve to use towards next year's budget, and, budget lasts for a long time. Or what you can do is you can allow employees to cash out certain accumulated time that will be paid at separation anyway, and lower those payouts at retirement. That way you're paying it at a lower rate, you're gonna pay it eventually, whether it's through them taking time and paying somebody overtime, or whether they get paid out of retirement at a higher rate. So if you have a policy where certain people can cash out a certain vacation day, provided that the city has that amount available, it's a way to reduce your long-term liability associated with these payouts, and also get them under control long-term. The city's just not there yet. There's been a lot of financial hurdles the city's tried to come over in the last 5 years, and it's going to be a long process. That's the financing alone is a 10-year process.
And we're
The long run, not even-
3 years into that, 4 years into that.
So our debt has been increasing dramatically over the last several years. It's continuing to go up. At what point do we bend the needle and stop that?
That is an administration and a council's decision. As far as if you want your debt to go down, there's a few things you can put in place. You can look at what you're paying down in principal every year, which for example next year is about 8.7 million, you're paying down in principal. So you can limit borrowing to let's say 7 or 8 million. So you know that it's going to go down by $1 million next year, but you have to limit that borrowing. The biggest borrowing the city actually does every year is your capital borrowing. Last year you authorized $9.5 million in city capital.
So the city, over the last several years, has not shown that fiscal discipline to do that. And we continue to borrow more, and we're now burdening the people that will be sitting up here 5 or 10 years from now. So a $450,000 debt service is going to be a 1.5% tax increase next year, roughly, correct?
Yes, but as I mentioned, with the weighted average, I estimate the actual debt service is probably between 175 and 200.
Right. So now we're making it their children's problem.
Well, it's not going out that long. It's not going out decades.
Go out to 15 years now.
Okay. But it's a way to smooth it out so that you don't have such a huge property tax increase there. There is an option so that the council can very well direct, the city manager to include it in the budget next year, increase taxes accordingly, and then you fix this going forward. So that's definitely a directive that the city council has to, has to decide on.
And you would recommend how much if we wanted to do that? $2 million? That's the figure you mentioned before.
That would pretty much make sure that you wouldn't have to borrow for the next few years. I feel that they'll probably stay around there. And there are other policies the city can put in place to make sure that over the last few years in trying to turn around the finances of the city, there are a lot of retirement incentives to try to get the older workforce out, get a younger workforce in. I know that now there's contributions related to new hires, related to health insurance. So the newer workers between the health insurance contribution between the new tiers and retirement, they do cost proportionately less than your older workforce. So there were retirement incentives offered to move out and trade out, not replace some positions. The city's kind of run its course on that. From pretty much whoever leaves, you have to replace. You're running pretty lean to your full-time force. So you can have policies and not do any more retirement incentives when people leave. What they're supposed to get for their contract is what they get. There's a way to possibly work with employees and have a longer payback period than pay over 5 years. Or if you're going to pay it over 3 years, maybe for 1.5 years, you don't replace that position to help you for the first 1.5 years of the payout. There's different avenues that the city can go. It's just a matter of what is most palatable.
Okay.
But the establishment of a $2 million fund would equate to roughly a 7% tax increase, correct?
Anyone else from the public? Yes? Please state your name and address for the record.
Nora Egan. I'm just wondering, is Jack Schnirman one of the people that are part of getting a payout? Because he did not fulfill his contract with the city, as I'm sure you're aware.
Jack did give a payout, yes.
He did.
Yes.
But why would he get one when he didn't fulfill his contract?
And he was campaigning.
I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know, his contract was over at the end of on December 31st.
Okay, so he knew he was, so he gave written notice before he won the election that he was quitting. November 8th was the election.
Nice.
So it states in his contract that the employee shall give the employer, the city, 2 months written notice in advance. So if he didn't give...
My understanding is that his contract ended on December 31st.
Of what year?
Of last year.
2017.
Because the council, this is my understanding, and Rob will correct me if I'm wrong, the council gave him a contract, gives any city manager a contract should they choose. But on January 1st, the composition of the city council changed.
Right.
So the new city council cannot be beholden to a contract with someone else. So his contract is voided on December 31st of the previous year when the new council takes office. Is that correct, Rob?
It is, but I think the more, to answer your question, I don't remember, I haven't seen the contract in a while.
I have it right here.
Okay, I haven't seen it in a while. And I don't believe that his payouts were necessarily governed by the contents of that contract. They are governed by the code, for example. So I don't recall. If you have it in front of you, maybe you can read it.
Okay, so it says, in the event the employee resigns during the term of this agreement, the employee shall be compensated, blah, 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 blah. However, in the event the employee voluntarily resigns his position, did he or did he not voluntarily resign with the employer before the expiration of his term of employment, then the employee shall give the employer, the city, 2 months written notice in advance unless parties agree otherwise. So is there an agreement with parties? I mean, would the parties be?
I don't think that necessarily would.
So why, to me it reads...
Let me just answer your question. I don't think that what you just read would necessarily relieve the city of its obligation under the code to issue that payout.
So we're just going to give it money?
The code is always going to wind up superseding anything in that contract. And I don't think that you read anything from that contract which would, again, relieve the city of its obligation to pay out an outgoing employee.
But did he give us 2 months written notice?
I mean, I worked for him, so it wasn't given to me.
So who would have been given to?
I'm sorry?
Who would it have been given to?
Yeah, but she's saying, what Ms. Egan, I believe, is attempting to say is that Mr. Schnirman didn't provide proper notice.
He did. Well, as far as I'm concerned, he didn't. Like, if he won the election, like, November 8th, and I think we didn't know the results until, like, really, like, November 9th, and then he came into office January 1st, you have holidays and weekends, like, you're not getting your 2 months.
No, I understand.
So, does that not make his contract null and void, or?
No, it definitely would not, under those circumstances.
It doesn't make it.
The payout obligation exists separate and apart from his contract.
And is that like a side item here that I'm missing somewhere? I don't see it in the contract, like that there's any.
Well, you don't need something to say the city code applies. It always applies, regardless of whether it's embedded in that contract or not.
Okay.
Can you just explain?
Could you just explain it, like, just for the Irishmen that don't understand?
There's a section of the city code that governs payouts for exempt employees. That provision applies, especially if the contract is silent on that point. I hope I clarified it.
So it's not on the part. Yes, you did. Thank you.
Okay, no problem.
So I would like to hear Mr. Mandel's question too.
I was going to ask you a question, if you could explain. I don't want to put words in your mouth. You're saying there's a difference between the salary pursuant to the contract and the payout pursuant to the code?
There absolutely is, yes.
Is that what that's your response to Ms. Egan's question?
Correct.
One has nothing to do with the other?
Correct.
Okay, I was confused.
So I have a question along these lines. So the example that I gave earlier was the city manager. And if you follow the code, if he was a city employee for 6 years and never took a sick day, and he took all his accrued vacation time that the charter allows, and based on his salary, he should have been paid $52,360. He got $108,022. Now I'm being asked to vote for something that approves that, and nobody can explain to me why he got paid more than double what the city charter says he should have been paid.
Okay, the explanation was given earlier, because maybe it wasn't exactly clear. There are employees that do not have the luxury of taking time off. I happen to be one of those for the last 4 months. I've not taken a day off since I've taken on 2 jobs. So, should I be penalized when I separate for not having to take time off? And when you're calculating that, you're using the 50-day maximum formula. I can tell you, as a matter of course, Jack had way more than 50 days of vacation time, or whatever fact you're talking about, just by virtue of the fact that I was appointed as acting city manager, so I had to be noticed whenever he was leaving town or taking vacation, and I think there were 3 vacations he took in the 6 years. So that number is way skewed.
Okay, so the city charter does not allow an exempt employee to get comp time. It is clear. The city charter does not allow an exempt employee to have more than 50 days of vacation accrued. If he was paid out at a higher rate, then the city charter was violated.
I'm sorry, Mr. Artis, you couldn't hear you.
I'm sorry.
So I was just asking, so then how do we know how he was paid out? Or how do we know how anyone was paid out? What formula was used is what I mean, Ms. McGinnis.
Don't city employees have like clock-in or time-out sheets or? They do have time sheets?
Correct.
So I know that Mr. Schnirman has been at events that I've taken time off work personally for, and I don't honestly believe that he's taken the time, or he has taken the time off. So if we want to go back and read the diary or read the time-in thoughts and we see, can we do that before we give an employee like their payout? Like, do we have to like pass off on this? Can we do like a little bit of some kind of an audit on what has been going on?
The payouts were issued, right?
So then why are we having this meeting? They've already been issued.
Well, that's one of the points that the former Comptroller and the City Manager made, was these funds have been expended, now are obligated to pay them in order to make payroll. As the former Comptroller very succinctly stated before, this is what's done is done. It's water under the bridge, as another speaker said.
So you see somebody paid, and you're going to have somebody who can't like get paid.
So I think everyone sitting up here is somewhat disappointed and appalled by what's happening and how these payouts are created. But this already happened. So what I'm thinking is, moving forward, I think the council needs to meet and discuss possible resolutions for payouts moving forward. I think that's what we need to do. But unfortunately, this isn't the time for that, because we're speaking about a bond. And we're speaking about a bond to borrow money for money we already spent. However, as I did say, this is something moving forward that I think the entire council needs to revisit on payouts in the future. I don't think any of us is happy about this, but it is the hand we were dealt. So is there any next speaker? Please state your name and address.
Sure, Jacob. I'm going to use your word, Mr. Ramos. I too am disappointed and appalled at the council's actual or feigned lack of understanding of how this all came to be. When I say feigned or actual, I'm sure at least 3 of you have actual knowledge of it. I'm sure 2 of you are kind of kept in the dark. How you can ask a council member to vote on something when you've only informed about the specifics of the expenditure the day before is unconscionable to me. However, it's not without precedent here in this city. Now, just for the benefit of those of you who don't know, the way my understanding of what was discussed by Ms. Hightower is there are payments that were made, contractual obligations, let's say. Some were called separation payments, and now apparently some of the funds, only people who aren't separating. Now, I can't speak to the CDA contract, I can't speak to the CSA contract, but when I was Long Beach paid fireman, we had a provision in our contract that allowed us to take pay downs, which was you could take a partial payment of money that you were owed against your various acts of time. We were capped out at $10,000 a year per member, and it was at the discretion of the city manager. If the city manager determined that the city didn't have sufficient cash flow to pay you the pay down, you didn't get it. Now, what it seems to me here is that's what happened. Now, unless there's some mandatory provision in these other bargaining units contracts, and I certainly know there's none in any exempt employee contract that mandated that you pay them down, then it seems to me that you guys had the discretion not to, and you chose to anyway. Now, you're coming to us and saying, well, we've given away this money, obligated to give it away, debate it. Obviously, discretion was exercised by somebody to pay this money, and you're saying we now need to bond in order to replace the monies that we've already spent. And if you don't do this bond, and you don't get this money, that somehow other city services are going to be held hostage, that those other city services are going to have to cease if this money isn't passed. How about we go to the 5th floor of City Hall and just start trimming the millions of dollars in wasteful salary and benefit packages that are given to political power before we start holding children hostage to your fiscal irresponsibility. Don't pass this bond.
So there is not millions of dollars on the 5th floor, and we're all provided the exact same information. Last year, the budget was voted unanimous, knowing that we were going to have to borrow for separation pay. Did anyone up here know if separation pay includes folks that may still be here? I think your time is... Let me finish. So did anyone up here know that? No. I don't think any of us were informed that. Did we all vote unanimously for a budget that included borrowing for payouts because we can't increase taxes by that much to currently save for an expense we know we're going to have? Yes.
Okay, I'm going to go back before you probably lived in town to City Manager Howard Poole, who made a presentation. The first and only budget presentation by a city manager that I ever saw, where he discussed, actually disclosed, the amount of unbonded debt that the city was looking at in turn by virtue of all of the various forms of hours that were owed to its workforce. Harold Poole, who can date that? 15 years ago? 16 years ago? 2003. Okay. He said that it was $20 million in unbonded debt for employee accrued time. That number has got to be 4 or 5 times that now. How do you guys not know that? Are you just going to ignore it? It's there. Prepare for it. You know, if you don't budget for it, you're going to have to bond for it. Don't act like you guys didn't know about it.
No, I told you. I said we did know we were going to have to make payments.
How much
and
is the city owe right now?
We plan to bond. We plan to bond.
Can you assign a dollar amount right now to the amount of time that is owed to the city workforce? Do you have a dollar value? I'm sorry?
Thank you, Mr. Guest.
You don't have a dollar value. That's irresponsible.
Thank you. Please state your name and address.
Joe Robson, Long Beach. Councilman Bendo was saying that he sees a major discrepancy. That concerns me because if he's off by that much money, I know me also being a member of the fire department, if I left with those hours, you see my hours, there's no confusion there. They're just saying that the city manager left and there's a huge conspiracy. To me, it seems like with the hours, and you're saying it's water under the bridge. To me, it sounds like criminal activity. I'm blaming him for asking these questions. How can you say it's water under the bridge?
That's not the expression I used. That was a phrase Mr. Lester used.
No.
Eileen Hession, Long Beach.
Thank you.
To go along with what he said, Jack was up here with his initial comments every single meeting, saying that we were doing so much better, we're okay, we don't have to worry about money. He was like lollipops and roses all the time. I think it's criminal what he's done. And when you say that we should look at moving forward, some of the questions that come up here, I think the council, did you ever look at this stuff? Did you ever look at the budget? Because when you're asking some of these questions, it sounds as if you know nothing. Now, you said moving forward, we'll look at some of these things. I suggest we move backward. Many people in Long Beach got money from New York Rising. New York Rising looked backward and called them and said, we want our money back. I think we should do the exact same thing. Early on, Jack wanted medical benefits for life for himself.
That was not
canceled.
Mr. Schnirman. That was when he was on vacation. I was not on the council.
Well,
but I
anyway,
was in the
we
audience
know what that was.
and remember.
I would suggest that he probably orchestrated this deal for himself when this, whatever, Mr. Agostisi said the management team that worked on it are all gone, and he's gone. I think you should look back and get that money back, just like New York Rising is. If he doesn't deserve that money, why should he get it? It's ridiculous that we have to suffer for that. I also have a question for something that came up earlier. Did you say that the employees get 1.5 sick days per month?
I'm not exactly sure.
They get 1.25.
1.25. All right, that's 15 days a year of sick days that they can accrue, plus vacation, plus one other thing. I think you should start looking at those contracts again. Most people get 3 sick days and they use them if they're sick. They don't save them up and get all these big payouts. I mean, look at what you're paying some people and look at the benefits that they're getting and make some strong decisions about this. It's like, it's not good. And I think the council has not had any leadership. You keep blaming the last administration, which how long ago is it now? It's ridiculous to blame them. And then you ask questions, you don't know what's going on. And you just keep tossing it back to us to pay more taxes or more fees.
Anyone else from the public wish to speak? I see a hand back here.
Well, this has to just be your information. When an employee is paid out for their sick time, they can only cash out 30% of their accrued sick time, not 100%.
Name and address, please.
Sam Pinto, Long Beach, speaking as a citizen, a resident, city worker, and primarily a union leader. Quick question. Do the exempts have a contractual obligation on the schedule for their payouts?
As described previously, Mr. Pinto, it's covered by the code.
Covered by the code. Another question. What takes priority? Their payouts or the workers' salaries? There's a discrepancy because there's issues with things not being seen in the code.
They're all priorities.
They're all priority. I'm saying, so right now we don't bond this. Do they get delayed or do we not get paid?
Let me explain. There are contractual obligations. There are contractual obligations at play here. Most of the employees, I think all but 0.3 of this are guaranteed by contract that we have to pay. We have no choice. And nobody takes priority over another person. Everybody's a priority. And making payroll is a priority for everybody in this building.
So my question is, what takes priority? If we don't bond this, payroll is going to stop, but they're going to have their payouts delayed.
The pay as described.
Even if they didn't happen yet, those payouts didn't happen.
The payouts happen.
They already happened. They all already happened.
Yeah.
So I just have a question, because you keep talking about the city code, city charter. Section 20, part 6 lays out that the city manager should be giving a report at every single council meeting, any change in personnel. And that hasn't happened once under Jack Schnirman's tenure. So how do you expect for him to publicly announce these things at meetings if he doesn't do it?
The personnel reports filed once a month.
Publicly announced, right here.
It's right here.
First meeting of every month.
Every month.
So was that the last meeting?
So how come it is formally announced, or why is it put up on a wall instead of you guys saying, because it seems like not everyone knows when people are having their payouts or their separation of service. If it's not explained, it's just hidden on a piece of paper, why can't we get to the option of actually publicly announcing it? And it includes
something that Mr. Bender brought up previously, I think it's...
Excuse me one second. Mr. Brady does announce that at every meeting.
You're talking about the monthly personnel report. These are two separate things we're talking about. You conflated two different things, Sam.
Okay, so I mean, I'll read the code, and I don't know if it happens. I think that's my question. Okay, so there's no reason to read it. But I will read something else because it seems to be a little bit of miscommunication on behalf of the council. It comes from the January Herald, where it says, Schnirman formally resigned as city manager on January 1st. So that means his contract wasn't up December 31st. And as part of his contract with the city, so because of his contract, he was entitled to more than $100,000 in unused vacation and sick leave. These were according to documents obtained by Boyle. The next paragraph actually ends up with a quote from Mr. Ramo. It's a big loss for Long Beach, but our loss is the county's gain. He's going to do a great job. We still have a lot of work to do in Long Beach, but he set us on the right path. Come on, let's be real, guys. It's not a problem. You can't expect members of the council to vote for things that are not clearly explained. You can't expect the workforce to be worried about not getting paid because of bonding issues. And you can't expect the taxpayers to be put at battle with the workforce because they're not going to get paid or it's going to be a tax increase. It's not good government, guys. We should really do better than this.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Sure. Joy McCarthy, 28 Wyoming. I just want to make sure he's only getting one payout, right? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was not enough. I want to make sure that he's only getting the one payout because you said that they paid out over 3 years. Or is that just contractual?
Yeah, that's under certain union contracts. You get paid out over 3 years.
Yeah, so he's only getting the one payment then, not.
That's what he elected.
Okay. All right, no, I just didn't want it to be 108 next year.
No. That's just
Okay, that's it. Okay, well, I think you opened the door for my 3 minutes of good welfare, but I'll wait. I just want.
Anyone else from the public? Anything else from the council? Seeing no hands, I close the hearing.
Item 1 is a bond ordinance authorizing financing for costs of separation payments to or for the benefit of employees of the city, stating the estimated total cost thereof is $2,100,000, appropriating said amount therefore, and authorizing the issuance of not to exceed $2,100,000 bonds of said city to finance said appropriation. Introduce and move the adoption of this item.
I vote.
Second?
I will.
Voting, Councilman Bendo.
This is one of these times where you feel like you got a gun held to your head. What I think needs to happen is this council and the city workforce representation need to sit down this week, sharpen the pencils, and work this out. I cannot understand this. I don't even have the information to know if this stuff is right. I'm sorry, I vote no.
The reality is that these payments were already made. And I think at this point, what we need to do to be responsible and to avoid bringing the city to a standstill or a shutdown is to go forward with this, and then maybe the answer is to look to audit to see how the calculations were made, but not to conflate the two and punish our workforce or punish our residents by having a shutdown. So at this point, I would vote yes.
Councilmember Moore.
Okay, so tonight I learned that the bond separation payment last year and the year previously was included as anticipated revenue. This is poor procedure. Good government lessens deficits, reduces taxes, and is also transparent with respect to sharing information regarding spending, sources of revenue, and the process for collecting and spending. Questions were asked tonight because now everything is in question. It's unfortunate that this item was not tabled for a special meeting so that other additional information could have been received. With that being said, tonight I'm calling for budget reform. We can no longer continue to do or to act in this way. We must have budget reform. The public cannot be left in the dark. In addition, many questions that were raised this evening was only because of the fact that this was for the first time that I learned that the exempts were included in this separation payment. For years past, it was my understanding that the numbers that were shared with us were only with respect to police, fire, and CSCA, all of which in times past we've never had an issue with. But today, now that we have new information with respect to exams, I will have to vote no because we must.
Vice President Dodd.
I think it's safe to assume that nobody wants to borrow money, nobody wants to vote to bond, and nobody wants to vote to pay for these expenses. However, in passing the budget last year, we made the conscious decision that separation with pay would be bonded for in order to limit the amount of tax increase that was imposed on our residents. I too was not aware of the fact that this separation pay or these monies were paid to exempt employees and those who did not leave the city. However, it is my understanding that cannot be refunded now until there's an actual analysis of what and if it was paid properly. However, who was paid and why it was paid at this point and today is not the issue. We need to understand that our city will be shut down, our vendors will not be paid, our employees will be sent home if we cannot make payroll and we cannot pay for the expenses that we've incurred. This money has already been paid. With that said, what I will not do is vote to shut down a city and to send our employees home without pay. They are entitled to feed their families just as we all are. And with that, I vote yes.
So no one is happy about this. As you may or may not know, this item has already failed. Since it's a bond, it did need 4 supermajority, 4 out of 5. So it did in fact already fail, which means there is going to be some pain felt. There is going to be shutdowns. There is potentially going to be layoffs. Potentially all part-time employees might be laid off. Potentially police, fire, contracts will have to be looked at.
How about management will get looked at?
So that's where we are. Unfortunately, these payments were paid. This bond was to pay for money we already spent on information that we all had. So my vote is yes. We now enter our good and welfare section. 3 minutes of uninterrupted time. Please remember to be respectful and maintain decorum.